Thank you all, and it's a little awkward to have a standing ovation before the talk, but appreciate it. Thanks much to Ron for a wonderful introduction, sort of like attending your own funeral. Hopefully we won't have a repeat of that soon. It's been a fantastic year. The Central Surgical Association, as I hope you all agree, is a really wonderful group. And to have worked within the organization for many years and then to serve as the president is truly a career-topping honor. I'd like to start by thanking the officers and committee chairs of the organization. They make the president's work easy, and again, this is an all-volunteer run organization, and so the organization moves forward with your efforts and support alone. We do have some professional help. John Blackstone and his group from PRRI have provided fantastic guidance over the last couple of years and really do a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes, and so really like to thank them. I've been influenced by several past presidents that I've worked with closely, some in Cincinnati and some through the Central, and would like to, I hate to leave anybody out, but I'd like to single out Jerry Larson, especially Fred Luchetti, Mike Nussbaum, Mike Brunt, and Chris McHenry for their guidance over the years and getting me involved in the organization and keeping me involved. I'd like to start with thanking members of my family. This is my mom. As Dr. Weigel said, she was a nurse and unfortunately passed away from cancer in 2002, so she's no longer with us. But really gained my interest in medicine and my love of science from her. Some of the first books I read were her nursing books. Interestingly, there weren't very many young kids in my neighborhood growing up, and so I spent a lot of time indoors reading, and it was a really formative experience to work through different pathophysiology textbooks at probably too young of an age to actually be doing it, but it was still fantastic. This is a later picture of her and my dad. We're fortunate enough to still have my dad with us. He is 88, about to turn 89, still going strong, still walks on upwards of 3 miles a day in the woods. Here he is exploring near Sarah's hometown of Kalispell, Montana, a few years back, and then wandering through the woods with my kids, teaching them, to always keep looking, always keep moving, always keep moving forward. And notice your surroundings. And so he'll call in the evenings very excited about different things that he's found in the woods that day. And it's always a good opportunity to be reminded just to look at the universe with fresh eyes from time to time. He teaches them some bad habits too. He has taught them that it's okay to eat pie for breakfast from time to time. We responded with the wonderful t-shirt that you see there, which he wears proudly. He actually thinks it came from my sister. It came from me, but I addressed the card for my sister, so he blames her for that still. We're fortunate to have him in life. Here's my sister and her family. They live in Oconomowoc. This is at their youngest son's Eagle Scout ceremony. She's really been a wonderful addition to my life. Not always did I believe that, but she's really been great and really been part of the glue that helps keep our larger family together. I'd like to thank my kids, fortunate enough to have them here today in the front row. Andrew, Caroline, and Christina. In order of the left-hand picture, and then there's each a picture of them, each doing something they love. Caroline and Christina are both heavily involved in gymnastics, and Andrew loves to play baseball. And they've been a true joy. If you do the math, children came to Sarah and I rather late in life, and as Bob Bauer told me once, it's okay to have a baby at 40, but it's really difficult to have a 2-year-old at 42. And he was very correct in that assumption. They have been a really wonderful joy. Very, very proud of them and everything that they do. So thank you guys for being here. And then my lovely wife, Sarah, as I tell her from time to time, she's my favorite wife. We've been together for 27 years now, married for 25. And really has been a great joy, a great partner in all of their adventures. There she is on the left, exploring Michigan last summer with the kids, and on the right she recently earned her master's in theology from Xavier University, and really fantastic to see her still learning, still moving ahead with things. I was fortunate enough to match into a residency class in 1995. Bob Bauer, who is our program director for upwards of 25 years, took a chance on somebody who met none of his attributes that he usually looked at for residents. But really matched into a wonderful intern class, had a great experience training in Cincinnati. Probably the most important part of it was my relationship with P.O. Hasselgren. Dr. Hasselgren, longtime member, still supporter of the Central Surgical Foundation, even though he lives in a city on the East Coast now, is a physician scientist of the primary highest order. He really took, again, somebody who was looking to go into the lab for a break from life, and really taught me that I had a love and passion for science, and really instilled, again, the 2-year-old level curiosity in asking questions and seeking out the answers to questions, and then trying to move the field forward in doing that. And so, if I had my druthers, I'd give a talk today on the red blood cell storage lesion and microparticles. I'm not going to do that. We'll talk about other things because, I tend to say things like the lines diverge, the lines converge during those talks, and that's not really the subject of where we are today, but that really comes from PO and really asking basic questions about why, and then the next level of why, and then the next level of why beyond that. So I'm very grateful for him. I've served in various capacities under 5 chairs. Here's 4 of them together. Would like to point out that 2 of them are past presidents of the Central Surgical, Dr. Fisher and Dr. Nussbaum. I've also very much enjoyed working with Dr. Matthews and Dr. Edwards along the way. And I have in my day-to-day professional life, have the privilege of helping to lead a fantastic group of 20 surgeons and 15 APPs that make up our section of general surgery. They continue to inspire every day. They work relentlessly to provide outstanding surgical care across the entire spectrum of general surgery. And we're sort of an old school, all politics are local, all call schedules are local, and all organizational charts are local. So within our group, we have expertise in minimally invasive surgery, bariatric surgery, general surgery, trauma, critical care, and emergency general surgery, and we practice the full range of that within the group. So I could not ask for better partners and friends to work with. I'll put in a plug here. One of the unique things that we have in Cincinnati is we serve as a host for an Air Force training unit, and through that we have 27 active duty Air Force personnel with us. We get to help train critical care air transport teams for the Air Force. We have several active duty surgeons who are based full-time with us. And so what I will say, in the Air Force and the Army will be looking out in the future for partners. If you have the opportunity to host one of these training groups with you, please do it. You will receive more than you ever give in the process. We get the opportunity to influence trauma care globally, which is a very, very amazing thing. And finally, would really like to thank the residents and our current chair, Jeff Sussman, but really the residents and trainees at UC. So much of what we do in academic surgery really pins and revolves around the residents, if you think about it. Other organizations can practice patient care possibly more efficiently than what we do. Other organizations can do research, again, possibly more efficiently than what we do. But it's really only an academic department of surgery that can train the next generation of surgeons to go out and become surgeons, scholars, and leaders in their field. And so this is something that, keeps me young at work every day, is getting to work with some really bright, amazing young minds that I know many of them have already exceeded anything that I will accomplish, and I know they will continue to do so. And it makes it really fun. It makes every gallbladder fun, makes every hernia fun, makes every trauma laparotomy really enjoyable. So this talk is really dedicated to them going forward. So what we do as surgeons on a daily basis is really difficult, and we should really not delude ourselves otherwise and to think that what we do is easy. Sort of like Craig Counsell pointed out yesterday, there's a lot of professional athletes that make what they do look easy on a daily basis. And if you think it's easy, go try and shoot some three-pointers from the NBA three-point line. It's really not. But what we do is hard, and we really have to stop and admit that to ourselves on a daily basis. Whether it's the trauma bay or in the operating room, we're working to save a patient's life or to render them disease-free. This is a really tough profession and a really tough thing that we do. We do hard things every day. This has been made worse over the last couple of years with a pandemic that none of us planned for or none of us hoped for. And instead of patient care, we found ourselves rounding and planning, really apocalyptic level events. What will happen if we need 250 ICU beds at UC? Can we really double or triple our ICU bed availability? And spent a lot of time during early COVID planning that and thinking about things that we really never wanted to think about. And at some point, this sign appeared in our trauma bay, and we really realized that this was the truth, that it was really up to us. No one was really coming to help us. And so it can be really, really difficult under the hard situations to keep your head up and keep moving forward. And so you reach this point, as one of my partners used to point out to us, it's always darkest just before it goes pitch black. So thus comes the topic of my talk today, which is really grit and resilience. This is baked into everything that we do as surgeons, and the better that we get at it, the better surgeons that we'll be, and the more we'll be able to serve our patient population. So a couple different definitions. Grit is defined as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. So think of something that you sustain over a long period of time. Resilience is defined as the ability to recover or adjust to misfortune or change. So that's bouncing back from something. Grit is generally associated with passion, resilience, courage, conscientiousness, and perseverance, whereas resilience is associated with hope, optimism, perseverance, and self-control. And you can really see the crossover between the two topics there. So they're intertwined. I first really knew about grit from the John Wayne movie, and then from the later 2010 remake with Matt Damon, which is the story of Maddie Parker relentlessly and passionately pursuing vengeance. We would not like to encourage that amongst our surgery residents, but it was the type of single purpose-driven quest that we really want to be on as surgeons. The definition of grit, and we will not use Dr. Mulder, we won't use the liberal and Canadian politics definition, but we will use the definition of firmness of mind or spirit, unyielding courage in the face of hardship or danger, and that really applies to Maddie Parker and really applies to all of us in the room. Angela Duckworth is a psychologist who has really written a career's worth of papers on grit and analyzed grit very deeply. And so she'll point out again that grit has two components, passion and perseverance. And much of her early work focuses on grit and perseverance with a difficult task. And she was able to find that she could differentiate West Point cadets between success and eventual failure based on their elements of passion and perseverance, which is what she calls the two components of grit. This is the grit scale she's developed. It's an easy 10-point scale that you can all take. We won't go through it in detail here, but it really asks questions like, do new ideas and projects sometimes distract you from previous ones? Scale from 1 to 5. Setbacks don't discourage me. I don't give up easily. Again, scale from 1 to 5. And if you go through it and take it honestly, and there's several online opportunities to do so, it will give you an idea of how gritty you are, so to speak, and what your grit score is. And you can really use that to learn and to learn how you'll respond to long-term difficult events over a period of time. So passion, when you look at all this, is the odd-numbered items. Perseverance is the even-numbered items, and then you add it up and divide by 5. So your grit score, you can go to, again, the website, and you can game it if you want, but I really encourage everybody to be honest to yourselves. Everybody here, just to know, is going to be above average as far as grit is concerned, just by what we do. So what do we know about grit? And this is Duckworth's work, as grit increases with age. As you look, younger folks tend to have less grit or score less high in the grit scale than older folks. A lot of that is life experience, but part of that is just understanding how to persevere over time and how to accomplish goals over time. Grit corresponds, interestingly, with life satisfaction. So more gritty individuals are more satisfied in general with their life. And will have greater levels of happiness. So it becomes desirable to have grit, or if you don't have grit, to find out how to get it. Do surgery residents have grit? The answer is yes. And if you, again, think of passion and perseverance, you have to have a significant amount of passion to make it through surgery residency, and you also have to persevere. Because the days are not easy and the nights are long. And so surgery residents really score above average on the grit score as a populational group. It's pervasive, but interestingly variable. So this is a study that looked at different components of potential contributors to grit, and really found no difference in sex, whether you'd played varsity college sports, AOA status, military experience, or number of publications. So it's pervasive. Everybody has grit, but it's variable as far as these other attributes. Grit contributes greatly to residency satisfaction. This is looking at how satisfied folks are with their residency with the delta over the mean of the grit score. And so the more gritty residents tend to be more satisfied when they're residency. And it can impact medical students. This is work out of our own institution looking at grit as a factor of medical student burnout on surgery clerkship performance. And again, the more gritty students had less burnout on average. There is a correlation between grit and burnout. Burnout is the danger that everybody faces in difficult careers. And so there's a correlation between that, again, that low grit scores equal higher burnout. And there's also evaluation, this is a groundbreaking work from Carl Villamoria, between grit and the association with different wellness outcomes. And here he looked at, and the team looked at burnout, attrition, and suicidality. Now, grit's not the only thing that contributes to any of this, but it can predict academic success. And this is a correlation between grit score and a number of publications, specifically in orthopedic surgeons. I'm still trying to figure out who had 1,100 publications. They don't put that in the article, but that's an incredible amount. So again, as I mentioned, grit's not everything. This is a correlation between the so-called big five personality traits: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness, and success in low and high performers in surgery residency. And so grit did not correlate as strongly, for instance, as extroversion and conscientiousness. I think we'd all agree that being conscientious is important, and emotionally stable is important. And with apologies to Dr. Yen's address last year, extroversion also appears to be important in surgery residency. And so grit can be shown to correlate with burnout. It can be shown to correlate with attrition, but grit alone does not protect from attrition in surgery residency. So now that we've established that this is something we want, how do you increase your personal grit? So Duckworth in her work over time has really broken it into 4 different categories: interest, practice, purpose, and hope. And so you can work individually with each of these. I'll take interest first, and back to Mr. Council's discussion yesterday, and Mike Ujiki's outstanding question about sampling sports versus playing one sport. And so if you look at professional athletes over time, there's actually a tendency towards sampling, especially at a young age, and playing multiple sports before they became locked in on one sport. And we know that with travel ball and all these other things that we talked about yesterday, this is becoming less and less common. But if you look at grit and achieving goals over time, playing multiple sports and sampling things. And I would say the same thing is really true in medicine. If you think about it, the 3rd year and 4th year of medicine traditionally, medical school are traditionally designed to sample. You sample different specialties, you sample different roles potentially, and I think this is a really good thing looking towards building grit as a long-term issue. Gradually becoming interested in one thing is part of this. You want to be engaged. You may not like every aspect of what you do. Think about internship, but you have to enjoy the whole. And as the president of my university used to wander around and say, you want to find your passion in what you do. He would ask you, what's your passion? What are you interested in? What are you after today? The next element to this is practice. There's a great book called Talent is Overrated. I'll save you the $10 and just let you know that talent is overrated. And Duckworth points out in her work is that talent times effort equals skill, if you really had to make a calculation of it. So talent times effort equals skill, skill times effort equals achievement. So really, effort counts twice in what you do. And then there's the element of practice. So practice needs to be deliberate, have defined goals, ideally have stretch goals, involve concentration and effort, be immediate and have informative feedback. And then repetition, reflection, and refinement. And this is the difference between somebody who doesn't achieve anything, someone who achieves partial development, and somebody who becomes a world-class surgeon is really the element of practice. A great example of this is Sonny Rollins. As Dr. Weigel mentioned, I have a long-term interest in jazz saxophone. Sonny Rollins is one of the great saxophonists of all times, inveterate jazz musician. practiced, and practiced to the point where in the winter of 1959 he stopped playing publicly. He felt that he did not have that he was not up to speed, his talent was not good enough, and he really needed to work. So he took 2 years off and practiced 15 hours a day under a bridge where nobody could hear him play before he played public again. And if you think about this, he achieved pretty close to the 10,000 hour mark for excellence in those 2 years of dedicated practice, but really took time off to do that. Think about as training as a surgeon or practicing as a surgeon, what our craft would be like and what our skill set would be like if we spent 15 hours a day practicing away from others until we got it right. And as my kids know the saying, don't practice until you get it right, practice until you get it wrong. And so practice is really a key point and will help to maximize any basic talent that you have. And practice counts twice when it comes to achievement. The next is purpose. Simon Sinek, who's a great author of leadership books, points out that you should really start with why and put your why at everything that you do. Not the how, not the what, because those follow behind it. But whether you're planning your next group's mission, whether you're planning the operation that day, or whether you're planning the arc of your career, you should really put the why at the center of what you're doing, and then everything will follow behind that. This really goes along the scale of what we do for a living. So a job is a necessity of life. We work in order to keep a roof over our heads and keep food on the table. A career, a lot of people see as a stepping stone from job to job. But really when you look at a calling and when you've reached the point that you really have found your why, you'll know that your work is the most important thing in your life. I'm going to use a patient example for this. As we've seen recently, mass shootings are daily news. The most recent one at a hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma yesterday, and represent a modern part of American culture that is a true tragedy. A few years ago, it was our turn. There was a shootout in Fountain Square in the Fifth Third building of Cincinnati, and we were notified that we would have multiple casualties coming to us. In the lower right picture, you can see our trauma teams stacked in the bay, awaiting those folks coming in from the scene. And one of the sad facts about this is this was our third multiple casualty event in the previous 2 weeks at the time, so we were well rehearsed at this. One of the patients that we got that day was a young woman who was going through the revolving door, listening to music on her way in, one of the vice presidents at Fifth Third Bank, who was trapped in the revolving door and was shot 12 times by the assailant before the threat was eliminated by the Cincinnati police. So she was trapped there, and her name is Whitney Austin, came to us, and the first thing that she said to us as she got off the ambulance is, "You've got to save my life. I've got young kids at home." And so Whitney was taken care of by Mike Goodman, who's in the back here, one of our trauma surgeons, became her direct surgeon, again, injured with 12 different wounds while trapped in the door, and the gunman shot her repeatedly while she was laying there. Now, Whitney recovered and survived thanks to the work of our great trauma and orthopedic teams. And she realized that she really couldn't go back to her work as the vice president of Fifth Third anymore. She had now found the opportunity to do something different. And so she's formed the Whitney Strong Foundation. This is a organization that really works towards gun safety, realizing that in Kentucky and Ohio, politically, gun control is likely not an option successfully. But she works very hard towards gun safety. Nobody is opposed to decreasing violence. Nobody is opposed to increasing gun safety. And so in the setting of very pro-gun states of both Ohio and Kentucky, she's had success with the legislature and with programs promoting gun safety, and goes forward making a difference every day. And you can see the quote there, that she can't give up because it's hard. And she knows that there'll be many people who give up, but she's never going to be the one who do that. So this is somebody who's truly found her why in life, and she's found her passion. She doesn't worry about the what, she doesn't worry about the how, but she's found the why, and then everything else follows behind that. Next part of the grit is hope and resilience. As we said, resilience is really an interplay behind grit. And there's a proverb that Duckworth points out, which is fall down 7, rise 8. And so each time you get knocked down, you have to keep coming back. And again, as we talked about with Craig Counsell yesterday, and advice that Dr. Mott gave me when I had my first major complication as an attending, is things happen, learn from it, get over it, and you got to move on. You got to come back. So this is an example of grants of resilience in academic surgery. These are grants by our group, unfunded versus funded given a given year. And we have a grant hit rate that would not even quite get you on a Major League Baseball team. We're less than 25% over the years, but we keep going. Another example of that is a young patient I took care of about 10 years ago now. This is Sophie Caragill. Sophie was from England, was visiting family in Cincinnati, and was in a horrific car accident. Was out on a night with friends, and they hit an embankment going about 60 miles an hour. She was a belted backseat passenger from this. Our helicopter landed at the scene, immediately recognized that she was near death, and sent her forward, actually before the other ambulances had arrived, sent her forward by the first ambulance that came in and arrived in our trauma bay. She survived the initial round of operations, which included a colon resection, a liver resection, and a Whipple. And then survived subsequent operations, but was left paralyzed. And so she, and we would visit her again, 16-year-old kid, suddenly dealt a very difficult hand in life. And you always fear that this is going to be the beginning of the end for your young life. However, Sophie was more resilient than that. She returned to England, became involved in a spinal cord rehab group there, and then discovered sports. She had been involved in sports as a young lady, and discovered wheelchair basketball, and that on a wheelchair basketball court, she could go really fast and hit people really hard. If you haven't watched wheelchair basketball, it's sort of like watching a demolition derby on a basketball court. And discovered that she had a knack for that, and soon became the ambassador for wheelchair basketball. Was then named to the Great Britain under 18 developmental team. Then became the captain of that team. Then the Great Britain national team, and competes internationally as a professional wheelchair basketball player in Italy right now. She's gone on and graduated from college. She's graduated from master's with a master's in sports psychology, and works again primarily as a professional wheelchair basketball player, but also as a motivational speaker. She is a representative for a number of different organizations in Great Britain, and helps raise funds for the backup trust there. And quote from her, and this is an interview that she did with the BBC, which is, she's learned that she can look adversity in the eye and say, "Come at me, because I can deal with you." And this is the definition of hope and resilience under very, very difficult circumstances. So that brings us to resilience. So we talked about resilience as really successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life circumstances. And there's three different parts to ways that we can look at this. One is have specific coping strategies, because occasionally we all be dealt challenging situations. Ways in which individuals view and engage the world, and then the availability and quality of social resources. So these are things that we can control. A great meta-analysis recently looked at characteristics of resilient physicians. This includes tenacity, you have aspirations, and you have commitment, and you just won't quit. It includes resources, and this will be the framework around you. I look at my professional family at work as my partners, as the other surgeons in our department, and we have a fantastic group of surgeons, and then as the residents. And this really becomes the support network and the resources at work. It becomes control, and to the extent that you can, you want to understand your boundaries, you want to have limitations, and you want to strive for the elusive work-life balance. As a resident, it's very, very challenging. As an attending, it can be challenging, but you actually get more ownership, and you can take more ownership than you think. It has to do with adaptive coping. So you want to deal with stress proactively. You don't want to be the one who yells or screams in the operating room. There's better ways to deal with it than that. And then you want to work and talk about others with their stress. And as many of my partners will know, a lot of times on Friday evenings, there's several of us sitting around the office working through issues from the week. And that's a very good adaptive coping skill that we've developed. You want to think use reflective ability and think consciously about professional growth, and then growth. You want to be flexible and optimistic in facing challenges going forward. So these are different strategies to cultivate resilience. It really plays to each of those previous attributes on the screen, but it's really taking care of yourself and taking care of the situation around you and keeping things in perspective moving forward. Andrew Hill from Australia talks about becoming a strong surgeon, and S is strengthening relationships. T is taking control of your life as you can. R is recharging and restoring. This is the aspect of life where many of us don't do as good a job as we should. Optimizing your mindset. Again, there's several studies that show that a positive attitude will really affect your reaction to a situation and will really help to strengthen your resilience. You want to nurture, nourish, move, and rest, again, an area where many surgeons fail. And then grow and develop. So look for the next step on the horizon, look for the next thing that you can do, look for the next way to move forward, and always be looking forward. And this quote it summarizes in this quote, and this came from Sophie, who sent this to me, which is, "I'm not what happened to me, I'm what I choose to become." And Sophie would very much agree that she has defined her life moving forward rather than letting her injury define her. So how can we promote grit and resilience in training? This is a diagram of really parenting, which applies to surgery residents and young attendings as well. So you can be supportive, you can be demanding, you can be unsupportive, and you can be undemanding. If you're undemanding and unsupportive, you live in a neglectful environment, and hopefully none of us have residents who work in that environment. If you're supportive and undemanding, it can become permissive. And so, this is the equivalent of giving the guys in the front here, unlimited screen time, and they can have donuts for breakfast every day, which they would like to do. But we don't do that because we are somewhat demanding parents and try to be supportive. There's demanding and unsupportive, which is the authoritarian environment. Many of this will recognize elements of this in residencies from the past. And as we've evolved really surgery training programs, we've come to focus on both a supportive and a demanding training environment, which creates a wise environment for people to work in and creates the opportunities for maximal grit, maximal growth, and maximal resilience. So the important parts of this are create a vision. You want to set the environment to grow as a surgeon. You want to build a culture of excellence. There's no reason not to be the best at everything that you do, and every patient deserves a perfect operation every day. You want to instill discipline in what you do. You want to have daily practice. Again, think about Sonny Rollins, 15 hours a day for 2 years underneath the bridge. And you want to have a practice that exceeds your skill. And then you want to compete and work and do hard things together going forward. As failures come, because inevitably will, work through them, learn from them, and move on. One of the ways this plays out in our local department in Cincinnati is the Hoyer Surgery Service. In Cincinnati, we name our services after dead chairs. And this is a traditional chief service that for anybody who trained in the 70s and 80s, or even before, will look very similar to some of the rotations from that. The chief runs the show. The chief is the show. The chief is the captain of the ship. They are supported by a PGY3 and a PGY1 and an APP, and then they partner with staff on this. And we really tell them when the chiefs start the service that we're going to treat them as junior partners. They get to make the decisions. Our goal is to set a line here and a line here. These are the lines of safety. As long as they stay within the lines of safety, they get to make the call on things. So they are responsible for the ED call, all the consults, elective operations as they schedule them, and then weekly office hours where they will see and book patients out of the office. They get a great opportunity to work together. This is Jen Baker, who's one of our chief residents, who's going to go into trauma next year, working with Suan Lim, who's one of our PGY1s, taking her through cases. And the residents during this period of time, the chiefs will typically do well in excess of 100 major operations during their time period on the Hoyer Surgery Service. And the goal of many of them is by the end they're doing them without staff scrubbing, with staff in the room, and they ideally would like to have the staff out of the room. We give them as much rope as is absolutely safely possible without endangering the patient. It's a great maturing experience for them. They will keep track of things. This is a Hoyer bingo card, and I'll draw your attention to a few things just to show you the robustness of what they're doing. One is 2 open cholecystectomies in 1 day, so that's on the bingo card. One is 3 appendectomies in 2 hours. That's on the bingo card. I won't point out some of the other things, such as patient drinks their own JP output. That's a good experience for people. Or my favorite from last year, which is we spent several days trying to figure out how to clear a toilet paper Bezor in a patient who'd had a previous Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. Turns out lemon juice helps to adjust it. Took a couple days to figure that out. So the Hoyer service and rotations like that, and hopefully each of you all in your training programs have rotations that check all these boxes, and this one certainly does. It's not the only one in our institution that does, but it really fills out the scorecard related to building that culture and giving people the opportunity to grow their grit and grow their resilience. So how do we build, and when we specifically think of organizations such as the Central Surgical, how do we look at organizational grit and resilience? It's a little bit different skill set. but has been looked at through a number of books on business, including Built to Last and From Good to Great, which are a little bit dry reading if anybody's read them, but there's important lessons there. One of the things that the authors point out is to focus on clock building, not time telling. So you really want to build an organization that will outlive its current leadership and that will continue to move forward as it goes forward, as it moves on. You want to avoid the tyranny of or. You don't want to make choices when there's potentially win-win situations. You want to focus on more than profits, not an issue in the Central. But if you're a business, you want to focus on the core missions of what you're doing while you're preserving the core of what we do. You want to set goals and try to achieve them. You want to ideally achieve a cult-like culture so that people are really focused on the organization. You want to throw spaghetti at the wall, try new things and see what works. You want to grow your management from within, and you want to realize that good enough never is, which is a surgical maxim if ever there is one. So how does this work with the Central? So the stated objective of the Central is to further the practice of surgery in its various environments and the study and investigation of surgical problems. We do a great job, especially with the second part of this, and we've really made a conscious decision over the last few years on council to focus on the first part of this, which is to furthering the practice of surgery through various departments. Where's the answer for that? It's really has become young surgeon development and mentorship. So you'll notice on the program there's a number of new initiatives involving young surgeons, involving the DEI committee, involving members of the program committee. The mentors, or not the mentors, I'm sorry, but the moderators this year were almost exclusively chosen from both the program and the DEI committee. The discussants were chosen almost exclusively from younger surgeons who were in the room to give them an opportunity to develop and become engaged in the organization. We're going to have a speed mentoring session tomorrow morning, and we're going to test out some new ways of mentoring. And then Zara Al-Hili and her committee over the next year is going to initiate a series of mentorship families, and you'll all have the opportunity to become involved in them. If you're a senior mentor, you may be the father or the mother of the family, or the big sister or the big brother. If you're a mid-level provider or mid-level surgeon, you'll be involved as well. And then this will really focus on bringing young surgeons along into the culture of academic surgery and furthering the excellence in everybody's department. So these are, again, new things that we're trying. We'll see if they work. I think they will, but we please invite you all to take a part of them. And we think it's an important thing to help move the Central Surgery forward and really buttress our grit and resilience as an organization. So what can you do? Getting involved. Every year there will be emails that go out. Here's how you participate in this. Here's how you participate in committees. Here's how you can get nominated for committee. Come and participate in the meeting. Attend, submit, and present your information. Support the foundation. One of the great parts of the foundation is reaching out to young surgeons at the beginning of their career and helping to get their research up and running. And as we saw from presentations today, people are doing extremely well with the limited amount of funds that we give to them. But it's usually enough to push them over the edge into success in their research enterprise. And then recruit, bring the next generation in and teach them all the wonders of the Central. This is a fantastic meeting. You get to rub elbows with some of the great powers of surgery in a very intimate environment, and everybody's approachable, and you can learn and make friends across specialties. And it really helps make it such a powerful organization. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much for the privilege of the podium. It's been a great honor to serve as your president.